Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's joining us today. And I want to say thank you. Thank you for joining the Spiritist Talk series promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I am very happy to be here to host this talk by João Korngold, who will be leading our live with a very important theme, hopes and consolations. And if I may, I know our operation team put it ahead of schedule, but if you put, I would like to make a take a brief moment to announce the current initiative by the United States Spirits Federation. It is the podcast like series Psychology and Spirituality, a bridge to a better life, based on the works by Joanna De Angelis. This program started just a couple of months ago and offers weekly episodes live at 7 p.m. Eastern on Fridays. The Psychology and Spirituality weekly talks are based on the works by Joanna De Angelis, as the title says, and it offers a safe space so that we can confront, compare, correlate, and expand on spirituality concepts from a psychological lens and also bringing insights, actionable tips, and real world advice to help you and I lead a better life. So, if you are interested, please subscribe to receive notification of new episodes at the USSF YouTube channel. And if you can show the QR code, there is this QR code that is on the screen now. And if you want to help the USSF produce more publications and promote Spiritism to everyone, please do take a moment to scan the code on screen for your donation. Now back to João. João, it's so good to have you with me today. And together with everyone who's watching this live broadcast, I want to give you a warm welcome. And it is really important to me specifically, but I think it's very important for all of us, this topic, hopes and consolations, because there's so much going on, right, João?
Yes.
This yesterday, today, this month, there's lots and lots of celebratory dates, and I just wanted to let you know that João will talk about them in the next few minutes. But I wanted to say, um, João, for those who do not know him, is one of the founders and directors of the Spiritist group of New York, SGNY, and the Spiritist Alliance for Books. João began studying Spiritism more than 25 years ago, and he has been one of the directors of the mediumship meetings at SGNY for the past 20 years. He's also responsible for study groups, and he especially likes to focus on those that studied the basic books by Spiritism, including the series of talks by Andre Luiz. He also is present in many other platforms, giving talks on Spiritism in Portuguese and in English. He is professionally an engineer and he works as a banker. I want to say to everyone, please take this opportunity to send your questions during this presentation by using the chat window. João has reserved time at the end to address your comments and questions once he concludes his presentation. João, thank you so much for being here, and I'll talk to you at the end of your talk later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you all for being here. Today is a very important day, not because it's April's Fool Day. That's not the main reason. Today, April 1st, 155 years ago, April 1st, 1858, Allan Kardec opened the first Spiritist group ever, the Parisian Society for Spiritist Studies. So also March 31st, 1869, Kardec returned to the spiritual world. That was yesterday, 153 years, right? 54 years. But the month of April, on April 18th, we have the launching of the Spirit's book, the release of the first edition of the Spirit's book on April 18, 1857. So because of all that, we decided to focus on the last part of the Spirit's book. As you may know, the Spirit's book is divided in 4 parts. The third, from the 3rd edition on. The first edition had 501 questions divided in 3 parts: the Spiritist doctrine, the moral laws, and hopes and consolations. So you can see that hopes and consolations was already present, and it was very important since the first edition of the Spirit's book. But the 3rd edition and the final version of the Spirit's book, that has 4 parts, starts with God and the creation, the scientific aspect of Spiritism that it's further developed by Kardec in the book Genesis. He talks about God in the beginning of the Spirit's book, and then he goes most of the Spirit's book on other subjects, and he goes back to God in Genesis. The second part of the Spirit's book, which is the incarnations and discarnations and the relationships between the physical world and the spiritual world, the journeys that the spirits make from here to there, and how does it work, is also complemented on the book, the Medium's book, which is the second book of the codification. Then you have the third part, which is the moral laws, which is the guidance of how we should behave, what we are doing here in terms of our moral evolution, how can we follow the teachings of our Master Jesus, and what to make in terms of progress on the moral side. But all those put together, we get to the final part, the book 4 of the Spirit's book, which is Hopes and Consolations. And why Hopes and Consolations is important? Because after we study the moral laws and we apply ourselves to our moral development, what are our hopes and what will be our consolations based on everything that we've been working? So this book 4 is actually divided in just 2 chapters. Earthly joys and sorrows. It's the first chapter. What is earthly joys and sorrows? What happens to us when we are here, incarnated, when we are in our incarnation? And it's very interesting that if you look at the topics that Kardec covers, there are 6 topics, and all of them are unhappy propositions. You know, relative happiness and unhappiness, loss of loved ones, disappointment, shattered affections, antipathetic relationships, fear of death, distaste for life, suicide. So where are the joys there? We see a lot of sorrows, right? But if we go one by one and we look at them, analyze them individually, when we talk about relative happiness and unhappiness, we know we live in an imperfect world. Earth is a world of trials and atonements, or trials and expiations. So here, what we can achieve is relative happiness, because true happiness is reserved for more evolved worlds, happy worlds, and the worlds where perfect spirits, perfected spirits live. So what does the Spirits tells us in relation to relative happiness or unhappiness? The earth happiness is relative to each person's position. So regarding material life, the life that we live in the physical world, it is the possession of what is necessary for survival. What does that mean? For each one of us, the necessities of our physical lives are different. But the happiness, the relative happiness, is acquired when we are in peace with our position, with our possessions, so that we can dedicate ourselves to help and assist others. Because when we are struggling for our own survival, for lack of health, lack of resources, difficult situations, it's very difficult to find the strength or the time to be of assistance to others. And Spiritism tells us that without charity, there is no salvation. The first charity is to ourselves, to make sure that we are in good conditions to be of assistance to others. And by acquiring whatever is necessary, and again, the necessary is different from each one of us according to our evolutionary path. Because I may be satisfied with less necessities than my neighbor, but more necessities than someone that lives in a more difficult environment. You can be happy with less possessions if you don't feel the necessity of them in your lives. So, for us here, most of us nowadays cannot live without a cell phone, because it's used, besides all the futile things we use our cell phones, we use for work, we use for communicating with our loved ones. But for people that never had a cell phone or live in places where there is no reception, that's not relevant to their relative happiness. So you understand that what the spirits, Kardec and the spirits were trying to tell us here, is that it's all relative in terms of the happiness in the physical world. But it is a relative happiness. It's not going to be perfect happiness. But regarding moral life, what can we have here is, as the Spirit tells us, that is the possession of a good conscience and belief in the future. So if we are in peace with our conscience and we have belief in the future, believe in God, believe in survival of the soul, understanding that this is only all temporary, we can achieve the relative happiness that is important for us in this stage of our lives. Then Kardec and the Spirits talks about the loss of loved ones. And mainly they address the ones that have departed. How do we behave on our relationship with those that have departed? And the Spirit tells us that it's very important for us to have a healthy grieving, in the sense that a spirit that goes back to the spiritual world is touched by the memory and longings of those it has left behind and loved on earth. But if they feel the inconsolable sorrow of the survivors, it really can affect them. It can cause them discomfort, unhappiness, difficulties. So Kardec and the spirits tells us how do we deal with the loss of loved ones? By respecting their memory, appreciating the time we had together, understanding the need for them to move on, and understanding that the separation is temporary. We are going to be reunited. The loved ones, true love, it's never lost. So whoever we are connected in true love will always be close to us, even if we are temporarily separated. So the idea is for us to try hard to overcome the difficulty of the separation, to preserve a healthy and happy memory of the times we spent together, the hope that we will soon be reunited, because one incarnation is very short, and our true loved ones will be waiting for us on the other side if they are in good conditions to do that. So that's why when Kardec and the spirits talk about the loss of loved ones, they reinforce the idea that we should try very hard to move on with our lives with a good remembrance and with the respect for those that left us. The next item, the spirits and Kardec talk about disappointments and shattered affections. The spirits reinforce the notion that nature has given human beings the need to be loved and to love and to be loved. Why is that? Because if our evolution is individual in terms of a moral and intellectual progress, it can only be made by ourselves. We only evolve living in society, surrounded by those we love and those that we have difficulties, because in learning to overcome the difficulties and learning to be united in a positive way with those that we love is the best way for us to keep evolving and progressing. And the Spirit tells us that one of the greatest joys given to us on earth is to be reunited with like-minded hearts. We that dedicate a lot of our time to the study and dissemination of Spiritism, we feed each other with the happiness of sharing the learnings, the experiences, and that's why we are here talking about Spiritism, being watched by like-minded hearts with the same curiosity and desire to understand and learn more about our lives here in this world and in the spiritual world. And the spirits tells us that this sympathy gives the spirits, the incarnated spirits, a taste of the happiness that awaits them in the world of perfect spirits, where love and kindness reign. And this type of happiness, the selfish ones cannot understand. So when we talk about the disappointment and shattered affections, it relates to those that we have difficulties. And we all know that amongst our loved ones, or the ones that live around us, we all have the difficulties with one or another member of our family. And what Spiritism tells us is for us to work on those relationships as much as possible, as much as we can, because in overcoming the difficulties is how we are going to avoid having to come back to a new reincarnation and have to face again the same difficulties and the same troubles with those that we have problems in our daily lives. Of course, we are not going to be able to solve all the problems because we are still imperfect spirits, and we have the capabilities of solve some of our difficulties, but not all of them. We still have a lot of selfishness and pride in ourselves that prevents us to be fully devoted to overcome our challenges. And so that enters into the antipathetic relationships also that are surround us. And that the spirits remind us that what it's important to remember that is the spirit that loves. The true love is between spirits and not between the physical bodies. And that when the illusion of the physical attraction dissipates, the spirit, we see the reality. And unfortunately, these two kinds of affections, that of the body and of the soul, they are often mistaken for one another. And because the affection of the soul, when it's pure and sympathetic, lasts forever. And the affection of the body, the bodily affection, this is just ephemeral and is going to disappear. So again, it's the recipe that the spirits are giving us in terms of how to deal with the situations we face in our physical lives, and how to have the relationships with those around us. Then the Kardec and the spirits talk on the fear of death. And the spirits tells us that death should not cause fear in virtuous persons, because when we have faith and we have the certainty of a future life, we know that death is just the transition, the change of status of having a physical body to not having a physical body. And if we are really leading a good life and we have hope, we know that we can expect a better life than the present one, because we are always evolving. And if we guided our actions through charity, we are not going to face anyone that we are going to dread in the spiritual world. So most of those that have an understanding of our spiritual nature, of the eternal life of spirits, they actually fear the moment of death more than death itself. I always joke that when I think about my own end of this physical journey, the Americans talk a lot about the bucket list, right? The list of things that you want to do before you die. I normally say that I have a bucket list for after I go back to the spiritual world, because there are so many things I'm curious about the spiritual world that I want to learn when I go back to the spiritual world. So my bucket list is on the other side. But of course, we, at the same time that we shouldn't fear death, we shouldn't want death to be close to us, because we cannot waste the opportunity of this reincarnation to work on everything possible to continue growing morally and intellectually, to learning more, to connect to more like-minded spirits, to expand our opportunities here on earth, so we can go back to the spiritual world with as much as possible with a clear conscience and with the desire to continue our journey. And they end this chapter talking about suicide. And the Spirit tells us that the main reasons for suicide are idleness, lack of conviction, and often satiety, meaning lack of understanding of our spiritual nature, lack of hope in the future of the physical life, and the importance that we should all focus on our mental health by living a positive life, by working on our mental health and with those around us. We should avoid any inferior thoughts, any inclinations for suicide. But that has to be by what we know in Spiritism, the consequences of suicide and the dangers for all those spirits that resort to this unfortunate decision, to prepare and help and assist to avoid as much as possible incarnated spirits to commit that act. So if we have a healthy relationship with ourselves, we are in perfect conditions to help and assist all those that we think have this risk. Directing them to the proper channels, very important, right? We are not professionals to deal with those that are trying to commit suicide, but directing and trying to save them with our knowledge and with our understanding is a very important role that we Spiritists have to play. So this is the part that Kardec talks about earthly joys and sorrows. A longer chapter talks about future joys and sorrows. So it has 9 items and it starts with nothingness, future life. And the Spirit tells us that because of our long journey through many incarnations, we have in our minds or in our spirit the knowledge that we are eternal spirits. We have the basic concept before reincarnation, and the spirit retains a vague memory of what it knew in its spirit state. So if we look at history of humankind, human beings have always been concerned about life after death. And it's natural, because as we look at ourselves and from the beginning of our evolution, and we see our loved ones or our enemies or those that are next to us dying and going back to and living, or the physical body dying, we are questioning what happens after. This curiosity is something that has been with us forever, since the beginning. And we can see, again, Spiritism asks us to be rational, right? And when we talk about being rational, and we look at history of humankind, if this is something that has always concerned human beings, it means that there is something there, right? Otherwise, it would be maybe part of it, a minority, but not the vast majority of humankind throughout existence. So whatever importance human beings attach to this life, they cannot help but wonder about the future, because they know that this life is brief and can be cut short at any moment. So what becomes of life after death? And this is a very serious question, because it refers to eternity and not just a few years. all religions in the world talk about life after death in more detail, in less detail, with more accuracy, less accuracy, but they all entertain the survival of the soul, individually, collectively, in any different forms. So the concept of nothingness, where does it come from? It comes from our rationalization of the lack of understanding of the spiritual nature and being very skeptic with what can happen to us. It leads to some of us to conclude that there is only this life, but it's always the minority. It's always the conscious choice that we make of not believing in God and in the afterlife. Because instinctive, if we allow our instincts to take over, we are going to have the natural belief, the intuition, which is the next item that that Kardec and the spirits talk, the intuition of future joys and sorrows, because it comes with the territory of us eternal spirits bringing with us these ideas and these notions. And it's very interesting on question 961 that Kardec asks the spirits, what is the predominant feeling when one is dying? It is doubt, fear, or hope? And the question from the spirits is short and direct. Doubt for the skeptical, fear for the guilty, and hope for the virtuous. Why the spirits tells us in a very short answer? Because those that believe that all ends here, even if they are completely sure that that's the end, they will still have some doubt. They will still question themselves. Is it really? Maybe there is something else. No, there's nothing. Well, but as they come close to the end of their physical life, the instinctive ideas that we carry with us as eternal spirits will kick in and will bring the doubt for what's going to happen. Is really the end. And on when you have you work in mediumship meetings and you encounter spirits that do not believe in life after death, and you start the dialogues and you bring them the idea that they no longer have a physical body, it is very difficult for them to deal with it. It's a big shock. And of course, each one has different reactions. Some of them continue refusing to accept, but some of them, they immediately start regretting some of the decisions they made when they were incarnated, because now they have to face the consequences. So that's the second part. When the spirits talk up to us of fear for the guilty, a guilty conscience is something very difficult to carry. We, in our incarnations, we make mistakes, and some of the mistakes are bigger than others, and many of us carry this guilty, and we are concerned what this is going to cause us to face in the spiritual world. And understanding and knowing about Spiritism, we know that we have to face the consequences. So even for us Spiritists, we carry many guilts with ourselves, and we need to challenge ourselves to overcome the guilty, because guilty paralyzes us. But actively working to repair the mistakes we made is what helps us move forward. And of course, those that lead a mostly virtuous life, and again, we are imperfect spirits, we're never going to be perfect in this incarnation, but we have hope because we know that we'll find ourselves in a place that is going to be a nice place. Of course, we are not going to find ourselves in the very difficult places. There are actually 7 situations that you can find yourselves after you discarnated. You go back to the spiritual world according to your understanding and your moral and intellectual evolution. So I learned this from Georges Elaha in one of his lectures about hopes and consolations. And he said, basically, you can find yourself in 7 different places. First one, attached to your physical body, if you don't believe it in death, and you still think that death is the end of it. Then, if you have this firm belief, you are going to spend some time attached to your physical body, not attached in the sense that connected, because the disconnection happens in up to 72 hours, like we learned from Emmanuel. But you'll be attached to your physical body through your mind. Second, you could be around the place that you lived and those that you were connected because of the fear of life in the spiritual world, that you don't understand the unknown of everything that is happening to you. Many spirits stay around the places that they feel comfortable with. That's how you have the haunted houses or the spiritual spirits that stay around in our streets, in our houses. Those are the spirits that are afraid of moving on. Then you have the spirits that go or are taken to the very deep lower zones, like the ones that we learn the description with Gregorio in the book Liberation by Andre Luiz. That's a very difficult place that many spirits that dedicated their lives to causing harm to others, that still work only for themselves and to cause evil to others, have a good chance to finding themselves there. Then you have the lower zones themselves, the place where Andre Luiz finds himself in Nosso Lar, which is, a place of a lot of suffering spirits that don't know what happened to them, but they are still not evolved or knowledgeable enough to go to an organized spiritual place in the spiritual world, and they are there waiting to be rescued until they open an opportunity to be rescued, like Andre Luiz, and then they are rescued, which is the 5th place, which is the transitory houses of assistance that we have the description in the book Workers of Life Eternal. And these transitory houses of assistance are hospital type of places that are located in the lower zones, that are the first aid to these spirits that are rescued in difficult situations in the lower zones. Then you have the spiritual colonies like Nosso Lar, which is the first step of organized places, colonies in the spiritual world, where, I believe most of us Spiritists are always hoping that we are going to end up in a Nosso Lar type of colony. And it's very likely, because with the knowledge and our efforts in practicing good as much as we can according to our limitations, we are going to find ourselves in places similar to Nosso Lar. And then for those spirits, the more evolved spirits like Andre Luiz Mother and others, you are going to happier places. Most of us here on Earth are not going to go there. So just little bit of an idea of places we can find ourselves in the spiritual world. Then the spirits and Kardec talk about the intervention of God in rewards and atonements. The spirits remind us that all our actions are subject to God's law. God's law is perfect. So any wrongdoing that we make, no matter how inconsequential it may seem to us, if it violates God's law or the natural law or the perfects, which are perfect, are going to create consequences for us. Again, understanding, as we learn in Spiritism, that the more we know, the more responsible we are. So we learn and evolve by making mistakes and learning from our mistakes. So when we make a mistake for lack of knowledge, there are no serious consequences. When we are repeating those mistakes because we are insisting in choosing the wrong path, is when we start to create what it's called karmas, but we call consequences for our actions. So the intervention of God is not, in Spiritism, we don't believe in a God that is punishing or interfering. No, we believe in a perfect creator that created the perfect laws, and the perfect laws are there to be followed, and every deviation from the perfect laws creates consequences. It's not punishment from God, it's punishment from our own conscience. And what's the nature of these future joys and sorrows? What does the happiness of good spirits consist of? And the spirits tells us that in knowing all things, in feeling neither hatred, jealousy, envy, ambition, or any of the passions that makes us human beings feel miserable, that mutual love is the source of supreme happiness, that they have no anxieties that material life brings to us. They are happy in the good they do, because the happiness of the spirits is always proportionate to their degree of elevation. So only perfectly pure spirits enjoy the highest happiness. However, others are happy in different levels, because between bad and perfect spirits there is an infinite range of elevation and infinite range of happiness. And the joy of each spirit is proportionate to their moral state. The belief in Spiritism, the study of Spiritism, helps our self-improvement. This is Kardec telling us, because it clears up our ideas about the future, that it helps the progress and advancement in individuals and the masses, because it helps us understand what the future will be, and is a source of support. So Spiritism teaches us to bear our trials and patience, with patience and resignation, to turn us away from the actions that could delay our future happiness. And it contributes to reaching our happiness. But Spiritism never says that without Spiritism there is no salvation. Spiritism tells us without charity there is no salvation. So it does not imply that we may not reach the same happiness without it. We can, and we can achieve happiness and evolution in any moral teaching and elevation that we choose. It doesn't need to be Spiritism, but Spiritism for sure gives us the tools to help us progress and move forward, understanding our needs and necessities. Then he talks about temporary atonement and repentance, the expiation, what happens in the physical world. And in question 998, Kardec asks the spirits, does atonement happen in the physical state or in the spirit state? And the spirits answer that it happens during the physical state through the trials in which the spirit is subjected. But in the spirit state is accomplished through moral suffering corresponding to the spirit's inferiority. So the repentance accelerates the rehabilitation, but it does not absolve it. We have endless opportunities to repair our mistakes, to correct everything that the evil that we have caused, the harm that we have caused, but it is on us to repair. And the first stage is the repentance, but the repentance itself, it's not enough. We need to work, actively work to repair. So this Kardec asks the spirits what's the duration of this future atonement, and what determines how long a guilty person must atone. And the spirits tells us the length of time required for their betterment. The happiness or unhappiness corresponds to the degree of purification. San Luis tells us the duration and nature of the suffering that depends on our time to improve. Because as we progress, we refine our views, our torment diminishes, and this changes ourselves. So the atonement doesn't last forever. Some spirits think that they are, because when you are living in hell and not understanding, hell is a mental state, and not understanding and seeing the end of it, you think it's eternal. But it's only as eternal as the time it takes for us to work on making reparations for our actions, our mistakes, and use our time wisely to repair and to progress. Then the resurrection of the body. We know that in Spiritism, we understand that resurrection is not possible. The physical body, once it's dead, there is no way of bringing it back to life. Not even the miracles that took place at the time of Jesus, the so-called miracle of Jesus. We know through Spiritism that they were not miracles in the sense of the derogation of the natural law, because if the natural law is perfect, it cannot be derogated. So the so-called miracles were just things that we didn't understand. The resurrection of Lazarus was in a state of catalepsy, was not truly dead, because if Lazarus was truly dead, not even Jesus could bring Lazarus back to life in the physical body. The resurrection of Jesus was a materialization of Jesus in front of his disciples, in front of Mary, but not a resurrection of the body. People ask, why did the body of Jesus disappear? Well, we know in Spiritism that Jesus knew the importance of making his physical body disappear, and he had all the tools to make his physical body disappear. So in Spiritism, we talk about reincarnation, which is coming back to a new incarnation with a different physical body. So that's what Kardec and the spirits address in the next to last item of the Spirits book. And then in the last item of the Spirits book, Kardec and the spirits talk about heaven, hell, and purgatory, making us understand that these are all states of mind. And again, it's very interesting that Spiritism brings this to us in 1857. The Catholic Church, through the Pope John Paul II, brings this notion in the 2000s. So Spiritism already tells us that heaven, hell are states of mind, that we create our own heaven, we create our own hell. Purgatory is an intermediary stage between heaven and hell that we learn through Christianity. And Spiritism tells us that actually, if we are going to try to put definitions on places we find ourselves, we all live in purgatory until we find happiness, right? Because we are not going to heaven or hell unless we take our minds there. It's in our minds. So we are all in this continued journey of learning and evolving. We are all in a so-called purgatory, in a sense. The last question of the Spirits book is a very interesting question. When Kardec asks the spirits, will goodness ever reign on earth? And the spirits tells us that goodness will reign on earth when amongst the spirits who come to live here, the good ones outnumber the bad ones. Because then we will usher a reign of love and justice, which is the source of goodness and happiness. And through moral progress and adhering to God's law, humanity will attract good spirits to earth and will keep the bad ones away. However, the latter ones, the bad ones, will not definitively leave earth until its people, we, are completely free of pride and selfishness. That's the end, the last question of the Spirits book. And to finish our talk, we brought here a passage from the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 9, item 7, which is called Patience. This message was brought, it's signed by a spirit friend in Havre, 1862. Divaldo mentioned last week again that this spirit friend is Joana de Angelis. And Joana de Angelis tells us that pain is a blessing that God sends upon the elect. Therefore, do not become troubled when you suffer. Instead, bless Almighty God, who through the pain of this world has marked you for glory in heaven. Be patient. Patience, too, is a form of charity. And you must practice charity, the law of charity taught by Christ, the envoy of God. Charity that consists in giving alms to the poor is the easiest of all charities. There is another kind, however, much more burdensome, much more meritorious. Forgiving those that God has placed in our path to be instruments of our suffering and to put our patience to the test. Life is difficult, I know. It is composed of 1,000 nothings, which are pinpricks that end up hurting us. But we must consider the duties imposed on us, the consolations and compensations we receive in return. And then we will see that the blessings are more numerous than the sorrows. The burden seems less heavy when we look to heaven than when our brow is bent towards the ground. Courage, my friends. Christ is our model. He suffered more than any of you and had nothing for which to reproach himself. Whereas you have your past to expiate and to strengthen you for the future. So be patient, be Christian. This word sums up everything. So this is a message of hope and consolation that I want to leave with all of you at the end of this conversation. Thank you all for the attention and the audience.
Hi again. It's so good to be back, João. Thank you. Thank you so much for explaining the ideas of this fourth book or part of the Spirit's book, right? Hopes and Consolations. You really gave a very insightful view of each topic. But I believe we have several questions. So let's go ahead and have a few. João, I think you have time. So Luis Vilaca, he said the following: is there a risk that will become ovoid spirits after discarnation. So I think, Louise, for those who do not know that, I would like for perhaps João to explain first what is ovoid, and then if there is a risk. Go ahead, João.
So ovoid is a state of the spirit in the spiritual world where they lose their perispiritual form and they assume the form of an ovoid. And why this happens? This happens because of when the spirit has a mono idea, cannot think about anything else but one idea, normally of vengeance, of revenge, of causing harm to others. And because they eliminate everything else from their minds, they start losing their spiritual form and they become an ovoid. And by becoming an ovoid, they are used by spirits that want to cause harm to others to do the work. You can read a lot about it in the book Liberation. When we just finished this study in our group, and they use ovoids and they talk a lot about ovoids. Now, what's our risk? Well, we all have the risk, right? We shouldn't. Our knowledge should prevent us from becoming ovoids. But if we end up doing something in our life, or something happens to us, that we become so obsessed with revenge, with the idea, with this that happened to us, we may have the risk of becoming ovoid. But I believe sincerely that is a very small risk. With the knowledge that we have on Spiritism, for us to get caught in a mono idea, it's very difficult and very unlikely. So, Luis, thank you for being here with us. I know you are on the beach. Enjoy it. But yes, there is an unlikely risk, but there is a risk. It's not impossible.
And if I may, Louise and João and everyone out there, I think it's important for us to perhaps think in terms of the root cause, right? So the root cause is that obsessive, fixed ideation on a point. It could be anything, most likely that idea, I've been harmed and I want to cause harm to the person who did that, right, João? So if there is a root cause, there is also a response, a countermeasure to that, which is, let's look at ourselves. Are we contemplating something? Is this something that's fixating us in one point, one question that we cannot move on, right? So I think it's a very good question. Thank you. Thank you, Louise, and thank you, João. So we have another question here. So during today's talk, which celebrates many milestones, such as the creation of the Parisian Society for Spiritist Studies, can you tell us the importance of this milestone?
The creation of the first organized place for studies and dissemination of Spiritism is very important, because it creates the guidelines for all of us that follow, right? Every society or Spiritist group, society study group that was created and organized after that first one, in some way or form, is based on the original one, right? Kardec showed us the path, showed us the road that we should travel. And you have the rules and regulations by the end of the Medium's book, which is the guidelines for us to follow if we want to start a Spiritist group, a Spiritist center, a study. And they are all based on his experience by forming the first ever Spiritist group of studies. So why is this important? And again, at this time that we talk a lot about the importance of virtual meetings, and a lot of groups and people are focusing on virtual meetings, why the importance of presential meetings?
Mm-hmm.
Jorge Lahai answered this the other day on one of his pingafogos that he has every week, and he said, "There's nothing wrong of you staying home and studying Spiritism and watching 10,000 presentations and lectures, but you are only doing for yourself. If you want to help others, and if you want to share your knowledge and share the work and practice the word of charity, you need to go to a Spiritist center and work there and share with others the experiences." So this here is very important. It's very useful because you can connect with different people, right? We have me here in New York, Marcia in Tennessee, Ricardo in the background in Texas, Luis in the beach in Brazil watching. So all this is very important. But if you do just this, we're not fully working on our moral and intellectual progress. And so going back to the importance of the first Spiritist center, organized Spiritist center, the guided model, and what we should continue to follow the example and the teachings of Kardec.
And João, if I may again, one of the things that I also find very interesting is the fact that if you go back, right, 165 years ago, it was an environment that materialism was so ingrained in everybody's heart, right? And then all those phenomena start to appear, and it triggered curiosity, right? Lots and lots of curiosity that lend itself to just a joke, a Ouija board, or any type of, I don't know, tarot card reading, and things that you still see today, where people will like to get to that spiritual world, but in a very, maybe, forgive me for saying this, but childish manner. And I believe with the birth or this milestone of the Parisian Society, it really started to put the fact that Kardec and all of us who are following his footsteps, right, are dedicated, serious, and there is this deep-seated desire to self-enlightenment, as well as contribute and help those around us. So I think this is also very interesting for us. And I say this because, as you know, as I moved to Tennessee, and there was no such a thing in Tennessee, we found it, and there's this need for why are we doing this? Why can't you just leverage what everybody else is doing? But there's a need, and I would say in my colloquial language, right? We're just turning on the little light above the city. So every time we have a place that is created, we're creating the psychosphere in your neighborhood, in your city, etc., for the attraction of goodness in terms of enlightened spirits. I hope I helped.
Yes, absolutely. No, it's important because your own experience there, moving there to a place that there was nothing in Spiritism, and
Yes.
opening something, that's very important. We have to spread and bring these little points of light. And of course, you went there to Tennessee exactly because of that, not by chance. There was a place that was needed. So there you go.
That's awesome. Thanks, João. So let's see if we have another question. And Luis, again, we Spiritist workers can expect to be workers as well after discarnation. Oh, João, what do you think?
We should hope so, right? Because if we spend our lives here, part of our physical lives, dedicating ourselves to work, we can only hope that we will continue to have the will to continue working in the spiritual world. Of course, we will need to learn. Andre Luiz started by cleaning the hospital there, from a doctor in the physical world to cleaning the hospital in the spiritual world, because of course the reality is different and the knowledge is different. But again, when you first join a Spiritist center, you don't ask to be the main director of the Spiritist center. You ask if you can, serve water after the passes, or if you can open the door for those that are arriving. You start from the very bottom. So if we are willing to continue working for Spiritism, we go back to the spiritual world and we start from the very bottom on wherever we can be helpful and we can be useful, but also with the opportunity of learning, right? I mentioned this Thursday in our studies, the book Voltaire, which is unfortunately not translated into English. I came back from Brother Jacob, Frederico Figner, and I mentioned that he went back to the spiritual world and he struggled a lot in the beginning. So at a certain point, he had to move away from everybody he knew and stay a couple of years studying, preparing himself, illuminating himself, to be able to go back and work. So, the work, we are eternal spirits. So we go back to the spiritual world with the intention and desire to be Spiritist workers there. But maybe we will need to study some time before we can really work, or maybe we should do other things. But definitely, there will be plenty of opportunities. It's just a matter of we willing to work.
Yeah, love it. Thank you. Let's see if we have another question. So someone sent the following question. We cannot escape the grief accompanying the loss of a loved one. Is it possible to make this painful process easier?
I think, first of all, we should not escape the grief, because if we don't have the grief, it means that the person that departed was not really a loved one, right? If we don't miss it. For us here that moved to different places from where we were raised, we miss our loved ones that we left behind, our friends, our family, and we keep missing them. Of course, we have the opportunity to go back and visit. So when we miss a loved ones, first thing, grief, yes, is important. Now, healthy grief, that's the key that Spiritism teaches us. And we can only find that with faith, acceptance, and resignation. Understanding that every time we missed a loved one, but miss in a positive way, with a warm remembrance, they will receive our loved vibrations and they will be happy that we are thinking of them. If we think of them, again, after a certain period of time, it's only natural that, time goes on and the missing becomes less and less present in our lives, but they will always be there. So every time we remember them with love, they will receive a good vibration. If we insist, if we keep on suffering, on struggling, incapable of moving away from the loss, we are causing pain to ourselves and causing pain to them. So at the very least, in a effort to help them move on, we need to come to terms with our loss and become healthier about it. It doesn't mean forgetting about them. It doesn't mean not missing them. It means to think of them in a positive way and understanding that is temporary. We are going to be joined together very soon, sooner than we may think.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for those beautiful words of consolation. it is so hard for all of us, right? When we lose a loved one through death. And even if you think about it, as they leave, geographically speaking, are to be close to us and they move away, and it's so hard. But love what you said. Thank you, João. I think we have more time for a few more questions. So we have another one. João, how to explain the belief in a future life to a materialistic person? That's a tough one, I would say. I think Kardec really pushed that one, huh?
Yeah, and I think here the first question is, does the person wants to have a healthy, fruitful discussion, or they are completely impervious to any external opinions? Because if we can have a healthy, a good discussion, you know, it's just bringing the spiritist concepts, right? Bringing
Correct.
logic.
Correct.
You cannot go to a materialistic person and tell that Jesus said so, because it's not going to make a difference, right? You have to approach a materialistic person with reason, right? So Kardec tells, and the Spirit tells us, that the universe is a consequence. So you start by saying, if the universe is a consequence, what is the cause? Right? That's a good point to start. They are going to say the cause is random. But it's very difficult to carry this proposition of randomly things in everything that happens. So by trying to explain randomly creation of the universe and everything, they're going to get stuck somewhere. And that's when you can bring what Spiritism brings to us. But again, this will all only work if the person is open to discussion. Because if the person is caught in their own ideas and have no intention of opening themselves to different possibilities, not to be convinced, because we are not going to convince anyone, but to allow the person a reflection on a different alternatives, right? You know, the other day, someone told me, well, we will find out when we are back in the spiritual world if you are right, if I am right, of none of us is right. And I said, that's great. Yes, exactly that. But the fact that you believe that we are going to go back to the spiritual world is the first step, right?
I love it. I love it.
Yes.
So we'll see there, right?
Yes. You know, time will tell. Time heals everything, and time takes care of everything.
There's also, for those of you who may want to know more about it, or maybe are not a novice to Spiritism and know a lot of people that are very deeply materialistic. I think the book, What is Spiritism, which is quite a thin book by Kardec, is a good one, right, João?
Yes, yes, it's a very good one, because it's easy to read, and because if you throw a spirit's book in someone that has no intention of changing their minds, they're never going to read it. Even What is Spiritism? You start with the Spiritism in its simplest expression, and if it creates some kind of curiosity, then maybe what is Spiritism? Because there is a dialogue between the Kardec and a skeptic, which is could be a very good guideline for how to deal with talking to a materialistic, because the questions and answers are all there.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for that. Let me see. We have maybe the last question. So Jesus taught us to love our enemies. Is it really possible? Can we overcome antipathetic feelings that naturally surfaces in us? How to love authentically those who have harmed us previously? I think those are all subsequent questions to put it all in the last one. Is it possible, do you think, João?
Okay, please leave the question there, because I have to keep reading and reminding myself. So the first notion here is when Jesus taught to us to love our enemies, This is not for our enemies, this is for ourselves. Because as Chico Xavier teaches us, when you hate someone, you send the copy and you keep the original. So you are doing more harm to oneself when you are hating someone than to the person you hate that may be completely indifferent to you. It may not affect them at all. And you are causing a lot of harm to ourselves. So in order to love our enemies, again, love is a complicated word, right? In Greek, there are 7 different definitions for the word love. And the true love, the fraternal universal love that we are all aim to reach, is called agape, which is the top one. But all the other definitions of love are love from the selfish way to a more fraternal way, and different denominations. We cannot go from hate to love immediately. I always say, the first step that we have to try when you have this hate for someone, the hatred, the first effort that we have to make is to move towards indifference. We're not going to move from hatred to love. This is a very long journey. It is a journey that we have to take, but the journey takes us from hatred to indifference to love. So it is possible, yes. Jesus showed us it's possible, and we see examples every day. How do we overcome antipathetic feelings that naturally surfaces in us? Going back to the teachings of Jesus, understanding that those antipathetic feelings is harming ourselves, harming us more than any possible harm we are doing to others. We are making things difficult for us. So let's work on those feelings, try to understand the reasons behind them, trying to accept that everyone is imperfect around us here, that we are all in a progress, evolutionary progress, that even those that committed horrible crimes and are committing horrible crimes, one day will be perfect spirits. So it's their own personal issues they are going to face. We shouldn't be piling on the problems that they are going to have, because in reality we are piling on our own problems. So it's a work, and again, you are part of this series, Psychology and Spirituality, exactly to help us learn how to overcome these antipathetic feelings and all other psychological issues that we have, right? And there was a last part on the question how to love authentically those who have harmed us previously. Maybe only when we become perfected spirits, but again, we need to understand that this love is not the same love we feel for the loved ones at this stage of our evolution. It's the end of antagonistic feelings to antipathetic feelings, and the beginning of the feelings of understanding, of patience, sending good vibrations to them. Even if we have to stay at a distance, sometimes it's better to stay at a distance if we cannot deal with them. But it's a work that takes time, takes effort, and it's not going to be overnight. But it's a work we have to do. There's no other way. Because if we don't overcome these hatred feelings, what's going to happen? We're going to come back with them in our next incarnation or in the other until we solve the problem. If they evolve before us, before we have time to repair, we're going to come back with someone similar to face the same challenges and same difficulties.
Absolutely. I think you have reached the end of our time together. I want to say thank you all of you who have sent your questions, your comments, and you, João, for an amazing time here together. I love the topic, by the way, and we could stay here for at least another hour talking, right? There's so much richness in this topic. But I want to say to everyone who's here, thank you. Thank you also for anyone who may not be here, but who may be following our weekly Spiritist Talk series. Please note, next Saturday, April 7th, we have at 11 a.m., we have Luis Lima discussing the spiritual layers of the planet. This is a must-see. Please come and tune in at this time. With that, I would say, João, can you please close our time together with a prayer?
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you all for being with us today. We elevate our thoughts. We thank the spiritual benefactors for the opportunity of being reunited today, of learning, of understanding. We ask for the strength and the courage to put in practice on our daily lives all the teachings we have received. We ask for the protection of the spiritual benefactors for the week ahead, for the challenges we are going to face. We thank our Master Jesus for the teachings, for the guidance. In this month of the release of the Spirit's book 166 years ago, we thank Allan Kardec for bringing us all this trove of knowledge that help us progress, evolve. Let us be thankful each day to this opportunity, and we hope we can all be reunited again to continue learning, understanding the teachings of our Master Jesus. And we ask permission to close our meeting. So be it.
So be it.